Many Americans are familiar with the acronym FDA, which stands for Food and Drug Administration. But not so many fully understand the large role that this agency plays in our everyday lives. The FDA is a massive entity. In 2019 alone, its annual budget was $5.9 billion. Simply put, the FDA's mission is to protect public health by ensuring the safety of foods, medications, vaccines, tobacco products, cosmetics, supplements, and more. In the food category, the FDA oversees everything except meat from livestock and poultry, and some egg products, which are regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Apart from food safety, the FDA also handles food messaging, like the guidelines for nutrition labels printed on the side of every food and drink product. Over the years, the label has been tweaked and reformatted, but today there's still some confusion.
We spent a lot of time looking at whether or not the food label worked, and the Consumer Studies Group did excellent work. And what we found out is that people simply did not understand how to use the food label. And in fact, after about 10 years of doing this, I went into our nutrition office and one-on-one talked to some of the nutritionists, and I asked them, do you use percent daily values? And they all told me no. And that's one of the key things that's supposed to make the food label work.
That's Dr. Richard Williams. He worked at the Food and Drug Administration for nearly 30 years. During that time, he was a director with the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. He's also the author of the new book, Fixing Food, an FDA insider unravels the myths and the solutions. Williams says that when he was at the FDA, tackling food messaging was a drawn-out process with many meetings and discussions, but overall little progress. He points to one example of the lengthy talks around what category certain products should fall into.
Here the FDA said, well, we're going to spend maybe up to a year trying to determine if almond milk should be allowed to be called milk. Instead, it's taken over 2 years. But it's not just that. Food standards now are just absolutely incredible. We spend a lot of time talking about bottled water. Should the water be allowed to be called bottled water when some of it comes from a borehole where a hole is actually bored in the earth, or spring hole where it actually springs out? And so there is a regulation on borehole and spring hole. This is the kind of thing that where we have terrible food safety problems and we're doing awful nutrition, we shouldn't be wasting a lot of time on. I think the worst one, I'll just tell you, the one that just drove me crazy was there was a baker up in New England, and they like to think that their product was great. So in their ingredient list, they put love. FDA, I guess, looked at the ingredients, couldn't determine that love was actually in it, and they sent them a cease and desist letter.
Williams believes that these bureaucratic actions are a waste of time and just for show. They do little to solve the larger problems at hand, like improving food safety and messaging that will help lead Americans toward a healthier diet. There needs to be more innovation at the FDA and a greater desire to work hand in hand with private companies that have the necessary technology and resources. He argues that the years spent tinkering with the nutrition label could have been better spent developing a product that creates an individualized caloric plan based on each person's body.
One of the things that the Nutrition Facts Panel relied on is that people would write down or somehow remember all the calories that they took in, all the micronutrients, how much saturated fat did you have, how much sodium have you eaten, and even, the ingredients. People just aren't going to spend all that time tracking that stuff. In point of fact, even if you ask them, what have you eaten in the last 24 hours? And remember, that question is the basis for all diet disease, not all, say 80% of diet disease relationships. They don't get it right.
Examining the private sector, there are several advancements in food safety and manufacturing that show promise.
Even in food packaging, we're seeing sort of nanotechnology being used to have indicators when your product is going to be spoiled. I think in the kitchen, one of the most exciting things we're going to see is 3D printers. There was a time when people said, well, we'll never see a computer in somebody's home. And I think the same thing maybe too with 3D printers. These are things that take your proteins, fats, and carbohydrates and spices, and they basically, through nozzles, they'll print out any food that you want. And I think ultimately we're going to find these things in kitchens. And the nice thing about them is you'll be able, if you've got a family where everybody has slightly different needs, you can print out a specific food for a specific individual that will help their nutritional profile. So yeah, these things are really cool. And I think of it as science fiction in your kitchen.
However, Williams says the FDA, whether it chooses to partner with the private sector or not, still plays a big role in the timely rollout of these new systems. Will they back these devices?
I think it's going to be difficult if FDA tries to block these things by making them be very expensive or taking, over a year every time they make any improvement. So I think one thing Congress can certainly help by taking a look at the laws, and FDA can not so much think of these things as something that's opposite to what they're doing, but they can work together, to try to get these things out here and begin to solve some of these terrible problems that we have. I think right now people are concerned about COVID, as they should be. We're averaging 400,000 deaths per year, as I understand from the CDC data. But CDC also says that we're averaging 400,000 deaths per year from poor diets and lack of exercise. And the Center for Science and Public Interest puts that figure higher just for poor nutrition. They put it well over 600,000 deaths per year. So this is a gigantic problem. We haven't made any improvements in food safety for decades. And so I think it's time for us to try to look at these new solutions that are coming out of the private market that might really help.
You can check out Dr. Richard Williams' book, Fixing Food. An FDA insider unravels the myths and the solutions, now available online and in bookstores. Learn more information about our guest, Dr. Williams, this topic, and past shows at viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, visit Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
For those who qualify for Medicare, annual enrollment begins October 15th. Walgreens makes picking a Medicare plan easier. With Walgreens Find Rx coverage, you can explore Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plans to find the right coverage for you. Compare plans online, over the phone, or in person at select Walgreens. Plus, find copays as low as $0 on Tier 1 generic drugs when you choose select plans with Walgreens as your preferred pharmacy. With Walgreens Find Rx coverage, Medicare enrollment is easier than ever. Medicare annual enrollment is October 15th through December 7th. Learn more at walgreens.com/Medicare. That's walgreens.com/Medicare.
Shutdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic contributed to the U.S. plasma supply decreasing by more than 20%. The shortage of plasma could impact many people who rely on life-saving plasma-based therapies. Plasma is used to treat patients with serious diseases and conditions like burn injury survivors, people with rare diseases, and people with certain types of cancer. In fact, 125,000 Americans rely on medication made from plasma. These treatments can mean the difference between life and death for people like John G. Boyle, a patient and health advocate who lives with a primary immunodeficiency disease.
As someone who's received over 1,000 plasma infusions in my lifetime, your donation helps people like me live a normal life. That's why we're calling on everyday heroes to step up and donate plasma now.
Visit donatingplasma.org to learn where you can donate at a center near you. That's donatingplasma.org.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
She's willing to take the risk and put herself out there and get more likes and get more followers.
The evolution of influencer marketing. Then,
many people had never seen destruction or devastation on this scale.
It's been 150 years since the Great Chicago Fire. We'll take a look back at the fire that forever changed Chicago. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.